Hello everyone and welcome back into the last segment of today's edition of the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network, and we are continuing our positional rankings, like I said, with the running back position. The most exciting, most volatile in fantasy sports perhaps. And I feel like this week's grouping, I have one guy who ended up being injured. Remember, folks, I do predict before the games even begin based off of matchups, seeing the matchups ahead of the schedule for different weeks. So I could not have predicted this guy's injury. I'm going to say it's Jonathan Taylor. Hope he has a speedy recovery. But the three guys that it did end up picking, all guys who are finding their footing or have already proven their worth. As Splash Bro says, running backs earning some respect through first 5 games, in my opinion. Not necessarily the biggest names either. And as we're going to see on this list, all of these guys can be seen to be quote-unquote high-end running backs. They are either in Tier 1, at least one of them is, or you can say Tier 2 or 3. And those are the guys who would say, okay, I would love to have as either my RB1 or RB2. There are still guys out there, like Splash Bros alluded to, who are not big names who can get you fantasy points. So overall, the running back position, really fun to kind of diagnose and analyze in that manner. But without further ado, let's jump right into the 3 running backs. Unfortunately, Jonathan Taylor is not among them. And like I said, hope he has a speedy recovery because he's a fascinating player to watch week in and week out. But these are the 3 guys that I have. And one of them, to start off with, is on my personal fantasy team and has really found a resurgence in this Bears offense. That is DeAndre Swift. Now, he still hasn't eclipsed 100 yards rushing on the ground just yet. But he has proven to be very integral to what the Bears have been building over there. I feel like the game against the Panthers was their best game as a collective unit, with Caleb Williams leading the way at the QB position. But a big part of what I want them to continue to do is try and find ways for DeAndre Swift to help Caleb Williams bolster his best traits. Because we all know Caleb Williams can throw the ball a country mile. But we don't think that he should, because of the fact, they need balance. And that's not what we saw for the first couple of weeks of the season, at least for the first 3 weeks. But the past 2 weeks, they found a happy medium, at the very least, where Caleb Williams is starting to find favorite targets in DJ Moore, who's also on my fantasy team, so go figure. But also finding a way to utilize DeAndre Swift in the run game to great effect, and in the pass game as well. And so DeAndre Johnson, as you can see, 20 fantasy points against Carolina, going up against the Jags, who still, despite finding their first win, are kind of a disaster right now. I feel like they're going to have another big game that sees another very balanced offensive game plan from the Bears. And it just goes to show, it takes a few weeks to mature a little bit for offenses that are trying to find their footing with a rookie QB like Caleb Williams. So, overall, DeAndre Swift is a name that I would monitor if, you want to start him. I specifically will not shy away from him if this is what he looks like for the rest of the season. As my RB2, he's someone who I greatly appreciate as well. So, he's someone who I feel doesn't get a lot of attention, but should these next coming weeks. The next guy is an obvious one. Derrick Henry. I feel like it's kind of taboo to include 2 players from the same team in my positional rankings, but they're just that good. And I just feel like the time has been coming for the Commanders' defense to face a team that they simply can't keep up with. As good as their offense has looked for the past couple of weeks, and I would still respect them if they lost this game handily. No doubt in my mind. I still respect Washington for what they've done to start the year with Jaden Daniels. But you got to shore up that defense. Because Cliff Kingsbury's been doing an excellent job as the OC. But Dan Quinn was hired, I believe, to kind of bolster the defensive side of the football. That's what he's known for. That's what he's known for throughout his career, whether it be at Seattle and Atlanta. He is known for bolstering the defenses, and he's got to find some kind of rhythm with it. Because Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry are such a unique QB running back tandem that you got to find ways to generate pressure or to have your corners hold up in coverage, because they will pick you apart at will if you can't do that. And Derrick Henry's going to be a big part of the game plan, because this feels like a game where he's not going to be, speedy Derrick Henry. He's going to be workhorse, wear you down, get physical with you, Derrick Henry. And it's not going to be fun for this offense, for this defense and the Commanders if that happens. He only had 6 fantasy points against the Cincinnati Bengals, but as like I said, Josh Jacobs, low-key horse, not exploding but lurking. I kind of agree. I feel like Josh Jacobs definitely could have ended up on this list. I feel like, the Packers' running attack is highly underrated because they have so many weapons in the pass game and a lot of variety and diversity to their offense. But Josh Jacobs is someone who, week in, week out, could produce for you. But again, matchups are what's going to be important here for running backs. You have to get matchups. And with DeAndre Swift and Derrick Henry, it feels like a no-brainer going up against two defenses who, have, had decent games. But I just feel like the time is coming for players such as Swift and Henry to really bring them back down to earth. And so that's why I feel like Derrick Henry is someone who, week in, week out, even with actually a 16.6. I just didn't see it in the graphic that I even put up there. 16.6 point performance against Cincinnati. Even in those kind of quote-unquote down games for him, that Derrick Henry's going to be excellent for you. And so that's why he's there. But a guy that I'm picking for my last fantasy running back on my list, also want to buy, but someone who I feel like people aren't respecting as much because it's not just the system that he's in that's making his abilities work. It's the fact that we're still waiting for the inevitable to happen to this guy. I still feel like a lot of people are tense about how this player profiles, especially in the past, but you can't ignore the fact he's been one of the more impressive running backs in the National Football League over the past couple of weeks, and that is J.K. Dobbins. Like I said, the offensive philosophy makes it so that J.K. Dobbins under Jim Harbaugh is the workhorse in this offense. He is the guy, the center point, the focal point of this offense. But the reason why I feel like a lot of people, like I said, are treating him as kind of a wild card is because of the injury history. It's still there. You still have to recognize it. You still have to respect that fact about him. And so I feel like a lot of people aren't attuned to what he's done this season. Because this season, I feel like, yes, there's more chance to get an injury, more chance to sustain an injury, and have him sit out an extended period of time, and for the Chargers to, have no answers at the running back position. I feel like J.K. Dobbins is such an X factor in this division now. Because let's say he remains fully healthy. I feel like that's something to kind of hold on to in the Chargers. That you have someone at the running back position that can make Jim Harbaugh's plan work. Because if you didn't, then that would spell chaos for an offense that is getting used to this new system. But let's say J.K. Dobbins goes down, then a lot of value is not just lost in real life. It's also lost in fantasy. Because in some ways, J.K. Dobbins is helping the reputation of the Chargers as a fantasy team. If he wasn't there, guys like Quentin Johnston, guys like, say, Ladd McConkey wouldn't be as highly valued. And yet, I'm getting comments about players like Johnston and Van McConkey. People glad to have those players on their team, even though, J.K. Dobbins is the focal point of this team. So, I'm saying, if you're a J.K. Dobbins owner, you should respect him and value him wholeheartedly, because he really makes this Chargers offense tick. He really is unlike any player in the NFL in that the offense is so integral to his success. Because if he's not successful, if he's not on the field, guys like Quentin Johnston and Ladd McConkey, and even Justin Herbert to some extent, their values heavily decrease, if you get what I'm saying. So J.K. Dobbins going up against the Broncos defense that is going to be a tough nut to crack. Over the past couple of weeks, they've been very incredible in what they've been able to do against the Jets and the Raiders. But it's a defense that you're going to have to find a way to do it. And if anyone feels like they can at least think of something to slow them down and have an offensive game plan that can keep the Chargers in control, it's J.K. Dobbins and Jim Harbaugh. And I'll give them a lot of credit if they win this game because of J.K. Dobbins and also because of the timeliness of, how Justin Herbert, Quentin Johnston, and Ladd McConkey supplement him. The Chargers are a team that is now becoming a team that I really like in fantasy. And J.K. Dobbins is to thank. But let me know what you think in the comments. That will just about do it for the show. This has been the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. I've been Chris Shepard. Thank you all for watching. But before we leave for today, I want to remind you to like, follow, and subscribe to the show on the network if you so choose. It's greatly appreciated by all concerned, especially me and my fellow podcasters. Another great way if you want to interact with shows directly, not just mine. You can use the Super Chat, Super Thanks, and Super Stickers features here on YouTube. On any show, you can click the $sign, your comment will appear, and I will read it out loud. Great way to interact. But before it's all done, 3:30 p.m. Eastern will be the time for tomorrow. As always, I'm out. Thank you all for watching.